Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm 29 years old. For years, my family mocked me as the failure, the one with the beat-up Honda, the one barely scraping by. Then came that dinner on Capitol Hill. My mom leaned forward, her smile sharp as glass. "You're too stupid to live here. Get out." My sister wrinkled her nose, her voice cutting even deeper. "Smells like poverty. You don't deserve a seat at this table." I felt the heat rise, but I didn't flinch. I steadied my glass, looked them both in the eye, and dropped one line that froze the room cold. "Then let this poor person take back their $100,000. Plates rattled, forks slipped, silence cracked wide open. And in that silence, they finally realized I wasn't the fool here. But that was only the beginning. 3 hours before that dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. No warmth, no greeting. Just an order. Capitol Hill, 7:30, family dinner. We hadn't spoken in months. Her last message had been another jab. A reminder that in her eyes, I would never measure up. I could have ignored it. Stayed home in the quiet of my apartment, listening to the rain against the window. But something in me whispered, "Go. Face them. On my terms." That morning, I had sat in my small office, laptop glowing in the gray Seattle light. And on the screen, the foreclosure filing for the Brooks family home in Ballard. My mom's pride. 4 bedrooms, white siding. The house she loved to brag about at church potlucks. The house that only existed because of me. $100,000. That was the down payment wired from my profits. After my first real estate flip. Silent, no credit, no thanks. She called it a family favor. But the filing told a different story. Months of missed payments, equity burned on my sister's SUV, and my brother's law school tuition. The house was collapsing under the same arrogance. They once used to laugh at me. My phone buzzed again. Garrett, my attorney. "Kayla, you sure about this?" he asked. "They don't even know you're the lender of record." I leaned back, staring out at the water. Seattle rain streaking the glass. "Not pushing," I said quietly. "Just collecting what's mine." He chuckled, steady as always. "I'll have the demand letter ready in the app. 1 tap from you and the eviction clock starts tomorrow." I closed the call and opened my closet. Pulled out a faded blouse from college. The one that screamed failure. Jeans with frayed hems. My daily Honda keys. It was all theater. Let them think I was still scraping by. Let them sharpen their knives. Because tonight, I had my own. But they weren't ready for how sharp it would cut. 6 years earlier, I had nothing but scraps. A part-time paycheck, a stack of used textbooks, and a dream my mom mocked every chance she got. "Real estate?" she'd scoff, sipping her coffee. "That's for suits, not for dreamers like you." She signed my first loan just to shut me up. A duplex in Fremont, run down, walls peeling. A gamble she was sure would sink me. I scrubbed walls until my hands bled, hauled trash in the rain, learned plumbing. From late-night YouTube videos, I slept on the floor, eating cold noodles, just to stretch every dollar. 8 months later, I sold it for triple. That money rolled into the next deal, and the next. Each one stacking brick by brick, while she dismissed it all as luck. At family gatherings, she bragged about Courtney's promotion, Jordan's law school scholarships. But when I tried to share my wins, she waved me off with a tight smile. "Flipping condos isn't a career, Kayla. Stop embarrassing yourself." So I stopped telling her. I stopped telling all of them. Instead, I built in silence. While they flaunted new cars and vacations, I poured my profits into rentals, kept my name buried deep in LLCs. On paper, I looked broke. In reality, I owned pieces of this city. The truth leaked out only in whispers. A single mom in Tacoma found her rent lowered. Because I'd taken over her building. A scholarship check arrived at Evelyn Tate's house, sending her daughter to art school. They never knew the source was me. I preferred it that way. Even the restaurant where we sat that night. They didn't know I'd rescued it 2 years ago, keeping staff on payroll when the lease nearly sank them. Ronan, the waiter who nodded at me, he knew whose signature kept his job alive. Still, I played the role they wrote for me. The poor sister. The failure. Driving the Honda, wearing old blouses, so they'd never see the fire growing behind the mask. And yet, there were nights when the weight crushed me. Nights when I stared at spreadsheets alone, wondering if silence was cowardice, if maybe they were right. But every slam of my mom's voice, every smirk from Courtney, every dismissive shrug from Jordan, I turned into fuel. By 29, I had flipped dozens of properties, funded scholarships, invested in startups, quietly building an empire behind their backs. They never asked how I did it. They never cared. And that was their biggest mistake. Because silence can be power. And I was done hiding. The rain hadn't stopped when I pulled up. Capitol Hill glowed with neon streaks as I slipped my Honda into valet. My blouse clung damp, my jeans plain. Every detail designed to keep me invisible. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with chatter. My mom sat at the head of the table, gold watch flashing as she checked the time. "You're still late. Still useless," she said, her voice loud enough for the next booth to hear. Courtney swirled her wine, smirking. "Barely scraped enough for gas this week?" The jab hit like a dart, her diamond studs winking in the dim light. Jordan loosened his tie, uneasy. He didn't join in, but he didn't stop them either. That was always his role, silent witness. I folded my hands, face blank. Let them think I was powerless. Let them believe the story. They had written about me for years. The waiter appeared, tall, wiry, jaw set with quiet defiance. "Ronan." He set my water down with a nod, the kind of nod that says, "I know who you are." My family didn't notice. They never noticed anything outside their bubble. Dinner played out like theater. Mom boasting about Courtney's new promotion, her corner office in marketing. About Jordan, already taking on environmental cases. Then the dagger slipped in, her eyes locking on me. "And Kayla, still chasing those little condo flips? Still playing freelancer while we live real lives?" Courtney laughed, shaking her head. "Bet she's still splitting rent in Fremont." The table chuckled. Even nearby diners paused, sensing the cruelty in the air. I sipped my water slowly. "Still freelancing," I said, baiting them. Mom leaned back smug, scraping by while we live well. Some people never learn. Her toast rang out sharp. To living well. Something Kayla will never know. But the room shifted at 8:30. A man in a navy suit strode in, silver hair catching the light. Garrett Hale, my attorney. He crossed the room without hesitation, ignoring outstretched hands, heading straight for me. "Boss," he said warmly, wrapping me in a firm hug. The word detonated across the table. Mom's wineglass rattled. Courtney's smirk dissolved. Jordan's head snapped up, eyes wide. Garrett pulled a chair beside me. "Didn't expect you here tonight. But since we're celebrating, your daughter saved my firm last year. $100,000 wired clean. She restructured leases, flipped the numbers, and now she owns 55% of this restaurant, worth $2.5 million. The restaurant went quiet. Forks paused midair, diners craning to listen. My mother's face drained of color. Courtney blinked, speechless. Even Jordan whispered, "You did all this?" I met his gaze, calm, steady. "You never asked what I was building." And for the first time in my life, they realized the failure at their table was the one holding all the power. But I wasn't finished yet. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. Mom's hand trembled against her wineglass, but her voice clawed back sharp. "This is a lie. You're bluffing." Courtney leaned in, desperate. Her lipstick smile cracked. "You're just some Honda driver. You don't have that kind of money." Jordan stared at me, wide-eyed, his lawyer brain racing. "You're the lender of record, aren't you?" I pulled out my phone, calm. The app Garrett prepared glowed on the screen. The foreclosure demand letter, ready. One swipe, and it was binding. I looked at them one last time. Their smug faces finally cracked wide open. Then my fingers slid across the glass. "Sent," I said, voice flat as steel. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Nearby diners whispered, their forks pausing midair. Ronan froze mid-step, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Mom lurched forward, napkin crumpling. "You can't do this. Family doesn't walk away." I tilted my head. Family doesn't steal $100,000 and call it loyalty. Courtney slammed her fork down, her voice sharp with panic. "You'll ruin us. You'll ruin everything." "Not me," I said quietly. "You did that the day you forged me into nothing." My phone buzzed again. A video call from Spencer, my cousin, the only one who ever believed in me. His voice boomed across the table. "She's worth millions. Flipped houses, saved companies, funded scholarships, while you laughed at her." The blood drained from my mother's face. Courtney covered her mouth, eyes wide. Jordan whispered, almost to himself, "I should have asked what you were doing." A couple at the next booth shook their heads. One woman muttered, "How could a mother do that?" The sound carried, sharp as another slap. Mom tried to speak again, but her voice broke, high and frantic. "You'll drag us all down with you. This isn't how family works." An older man near the bar scoffed. "Looks to me like she's the only one who worked." A ripple of agreement moved through the room. My family shrank under the weight of strangers' stares. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly, louder than any scream. "You thought I was nothing," I said. "Now you have nothing to stand on." The restaurant went still. Even the servers froze, their trays balanced in midair. And for the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking under their gaze. But they still hadn't learned. Not yet. 2 months later, the foreclosure hit the records. The Brooks house, my mother's pride, was stripped from her name in black ink. She moved into a budget motel off Aurora Avenue, her real estate contacts scattering. the moment the news spread. The queen of open houses reduced to whispering about weekly rates and broken ice machines. Courtney's glitter faded too. Her marketing job had thrived on Mom's reputation. But clients don't trust a name tied to public scandal. One by one, they cut her loose. Jordan survived, but barely. He took a junior position at a smaller firm. No family network to prop him up. For the first time, he had to stand alone. And me? I signed papers for a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. Glass walls, wide sky, a space built on my choices, not their ridicule. From that office, I sketched plans for an affordable housing project in the city. Homes for artists, single parents, dreamers like I once was, because success only matters when you turn it into something bigger than revenge. Still, the ghost tried to reach me. Mom's voicemails swung from rage to begging. Courtney's texts dripped with excuses. Even Jordan left one message, voice low. I should have seen you, I'm sorry. I listened once, then deleted it. No reply. Because survival sometimes means cutting the rope before it drags you under. Toxic ties only break you if you let them hold. And I refuse to be held any longer. Now, when rain sweeps across Seattle, I remember that dinner. The insults, the silence, the moment I flipped the table, and I breathe easier knowing that walking away gave me back my life. If you've ever been underestimated, if your own family has mocked your dreams, know this. Their disbelief doesn't define you. Your results do. Your truth does. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this one hit close, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is simply living free before saying goodbye. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories that reminds us we are stronger than we think.
The first buzz came just after I finalized the wireframes. My phone vibrated on the corner of my desk. A thin red banner blinking fraud alert. $45,000 charged at Malibu Palms Resort. I stared at the notification, unblinking. For a second, I thought maybe it was a glitch, a misread, something automated gone wrong. Then the second buzz hit. Same card, same amount, same hotel. I didn't drop the coffee cup, I just forgot I was holding it. It tipped sideways and soaked through the edge of my sketchbook, the marker ink bleeding into useless waves. I grabbed tissues, blotting instinctively, but the water was already merging with dried highlighter and 3 weeks of deadlines. I sat down slowly, barely breathing. My birthday, no messages, no calls, not even a text. Just this. I pulled up my banking app. The charges weren't just pending, they were approved. Room suites, spa packages, rooftop bar tabs. The card used was the platinum one, the one only I held. Or so I thought. With shaking hands, I dialed home. Mom answered after 4 rings. Lissy, it's late. Is everything all right? There's $45,000 charged to my card. I said, at Malibu Palms. A pause. Then the line crackled and Dad's voice came on. Jovial. Callista. Relax. Arden needed a weekend to unwind. She's been under a lot of stress lately. You gave her my card. It's not like she maxed it out. Mom said, she's networking with some really promising people. You didn't think to ask me. Dad chuckled. You'll earn it back. You always do. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen. My name printed above the debt. Their laughter still echoed in my ear when I ended the call and turned off my phone. The office lights hummed above me as I stared into the dark window, my reflection barely visible against the night skyline. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The next morning, I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Nestled between old contracts and tax receipts was a document I hadn't looked at in over a year. The deed to the house, signed and notarized. My name, in bold. It started with a foreclosure notice and a call that shook something loose in me. My father's voice had cracked when he said, I just need a little help. Callie, just until I get back on my feet. I took a leave from my apartment, boxed up my studio gear, and moved back into the house with the chipped porch rail and the smell of rosemary from my mother's garden. The plan was 3 months 6, tops, long enough to stabilize things. I signed on as a guarantor for the mortgage, paid off the second lien, took over the utilities. My savings dwindled faster than I expected, but they were grateful. At least, they said they were. Arden had already moved back months earlier, claiming burnout after a failed internship in LA. She wore silk robes at noon and ordered brain fuel smoothies from that overpriced health store downtown. "I've got something big coming," she'd say, flipping through glossy startup pitch decks on her laptop while ignoring the past due notices stacking up by the door. I covered those too. The pantry didn't stock itself. Neither did the Wi-Fi, the gas, the phone plans still tied to my name. I picked up freelance work to pad the gaps my full-time job couldn't cover. I stopped buying new clothes, skipped dentist appointments, told myself it was just for now. Every time I raised a concern, my mother would tilt her head with that gentle condescension only she could perfect. "She's trying her best." Callista. Not everyone's built like you, built like me. What did that even mean? That I didn't break, that I didn't say no. I tried not to keep track. I tried not to count, but I did. 19 months of Sunday dinners where I cooked and they criticized the spice levels. 19 months of just this once and we'll pay you back when things improve. 19 months of pretending this was still a family and not a contract I never agreed to sign. That night, after they laughed off the Malibu charge, I sat at the kitchen table and scrolled through Arden's Instagram. There she was, poolside, captioned "Manifesting. Deserve this." In the corner of the photo sat a pale pink handbag with gold hardware. I recognized it instantly. I'd seen it behind Mom's chair last week. I couldn't sleep that night. My body stayed still, but my thoughts moved like a needle skipping on a broken record back to the voice in my ear. Dad's chuckle. Mom's silence. Arden's casual theft wrapped in entitlement. I got out of bed around 3 and padded into the home office I once thought I'd use for building something of my own. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank. My hands didn't shake this time. They moved with mechanical precision tabs, filters, monthly statements, transaction histories. Over $3,000 at Whole Foods, nearly $2,000 at Nordstrom, 2 separate Uber rides to Malibu on back-to-back weekends, both charged to my account. And then Bristol Jewelers, $750. That was new. In my email, I found an auto-forwarded message from the credit card company. At the bottom, voice message transcription not available. Audio attached. I clicked play. Don't worry. Arden's voice laughed through the speaker. She never checks anything until the end of the month. By then, it's all already paid. A rustle. A muffled clink of glass. Besides, Dad said it's basically family money. What's she gonna do? Call the cops? Silence. Then Mom's voice, faint but audible. "She's always been uptight about money. Not like you." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until my vision blurred. I stood up too fast and stumbled toward the hallway. My stomach turned so violently I had to grip the banister. I made it to the bathroom just in time. Afterward, I sat on the cold tile floor, knees to chest, breath shallow. Everything in me wanted to scream, confront, demand. But instead, I stood, rinsed my mouth, and walked back into the office. I opened the bottom drawer. That drawer had always been my father's domain folders labeled in neat handwriting. Old tax returns, manuals for tools he never used anymore. But tucked near the back was a brown envelope I hadn't touched since the day we notarized it. The quitclaim deed, transferring full ownership of the house to me. A temporary fix, he'd said, to shield the property during the lien investigation. No one had mentioned it since. Maybe they'd forgotten. Maybe they thought I had. I ran my finger over the signature line. Wallace Dorn. Witnessed. Stamped. Legal. I placed it gently on the desk, next to the list of charges, and opened a clean folder. A plan was already forming before I realized I was making one. I remembered the day clearly now, 19 months ago, sitting across from Dad in the attorney's office, both of us sweating through the silence as the notary slid the documents across the table. He didn't look at me when he signed them, said it was just a temporary maneuver to protect the house from the lien. I'd believed him. Now I understood. That signature hadn't just transferred legal ownership, it handed me the one thing they never thought I'd use: leverage. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I opened a clean spreadsheet and began categorizing every dollar I'd spent since moving back. Mortgage payments, utility bills, medical debts, Arden's spa treatments. When they'd been disguised as family health expenses, I kept the tone clinical, the columns neat. Facts couldn't be debated. That same afternoon, I called Aunt Rosamond. I hadn't spoken to her since the Christmas before the collapse, when she brought her own food because she didn't trust Lucille's shortcuts with poultry. She picked up on the second ring, Callista. She said, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." I didn't cry. I told her the facts, the charges, the voicemail, the deed. She listened without interruption. "Then I've got housing above the bistro in Santa Fe, staff quarters, 3 rooms, modest, but clean, and work dishwashing, food prep, host shifts, real pay for real work." She didn't ask if they'd accept. She just said, "Give them a choice, then step back." That night, I pulled Arden's old card from the junk drawer still active, apparently, and booked 3 one-way tickets. Santa Fe, Sunday morning departure. In the days that followed, I kept my routine unchanged. I cooked dinner. I smiled when spoken to. I said nothing when Mom asked if I could cover the water bill. When Friday arrived, I handed them an envelope. "Weekend getaway." I said, "My treat." I watched their car pull out of the driveway, suitcases crammed in the trunk, voices high with excitement. By the time they reached the resort, the realtor had already scheduled the open house. I used Arden's old credit card for the tickets, the one she forgot about when she started begging poverty on Instagram. It was still linked to her vanity email account, the one she used for networking with strangers who promised investments over brunch. She probably hadn't checked the balance in over a year. 3 one-way tickets. Santa Fe, Sunday morning departure. I didn't include a return. Next came the packing. Not for them, only for me. The things I'd bought, the tools I used, the pieces of my life they'd mistaken for shared property. I digitized every receipt, screenshot every message, and made backup copies of the voicemail where they laughed about stealing from me. I called the real estate agent Rosamond had recommended Sandra. Efficient, discreet. She didn't flinch when I said, "The family doesn't know I'm selling yet. Do you have legal ownership? I do. That's all I need." I moved fast. While they lounged on the beach at a resort I'd never afford for myself, I staged the house. Neutral towels, light-scented candles, a fresh coat of paint over the water stain in the guest bathroom. By Saturday evening, the professional photos were up. The listing went live at sunrise. Then I waited. Sunday morning, I stood at the front window, watching the Uber pull into the driveway. Arden was still shouting something out the window, hair twisted up in a bun that probably took an hour to style. My parents were smiling. Luggage was tossed in without care. They didn't even wave goodbye. The moment the car disappeared around the corner, I dialed Sandra. "They're gone." I said, "Perfect." She replied, "Open house is at noon. I'll bring the sign." I walked through the house with a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. I touched the banister I'd once helped sand with my father when I was 11. The cabinet handle my mother always said she'd replace but never did. Then I locked the door, not to protect them from the outside world, but to protect what was left of me from them. They arrived mid-afternoon, expecting applause. I heard the car door slam first, then the slow rise of Arden's voice, sharp and confused, cutting through the stillness of the neighborhood like a knife. "What the hell is this?" The sold sign stood firm in the front yard, staked in the dry grass where my father's hydrangeas used to bloom. My family stood in front of it like someone had planted a gravestone on sacred land. I stepped out of the house and onto the porch, a manila folder tucked under one arm. They turned in unison. Arden still wore her designer sunglasses, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Mom's face crumpled immediately, like she'd rehearsed it. Dad's mouth opened and closed, looking for the right lie. "Lissy," Mom said, voice cracking, "there's been a mistake." No, I said calmly. There hasn't. Dad took a step forward. Sweetheart, this isn't what we discussed. You were just going to hold the deed for tax protection. You signed it. I replied. It's legal. It's binding. It's mine. I stepped off the porch and handed them each a document one by one. Arden got the list of charges in her name. Transferred debt, interest rates, payment schedule. Mom received a breakdown of what I'd paid for over 19 months. Annotated, itemized, every grocery run, every doctor's visit, every loan payoff they'd forgotten to thank me for. Dad held the job contracts from Aunt Rosamond's bistro, entry-level positions, staff housing, no favors, no shortcuts. Arden's voice rose immediately. You can't be serious. This is theft. You stole our house. I didn't flinch. I sold my house. You are out of your mind. She spat. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You'll regret this. Mom had gone quiet. Tears streaming now, whispering my name like it might soften me. Dad kept muttering something about miscommunication, about family, about forgiveness. I didn't answer their noise. I simply stepped back, letting it roll past me. You have two choices, I said. You can take the jobs, go to Santa Fe, start over, or... Arden tore up her page in half, then into quarters, flinging the pieces into the air like confetti. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said, voice low. It just makes me free. Mom sank onto the lawn, sobbing into her hands. Dad looked away. Arden stormed toward the car, kicking the gravel as she passed. I stood there until their noise ran out. No more guilt. I said to no one in particular. No more emotional blackmail. I turned toward the house. Behind me, the sold sign stood tall. And ahead, a lock I finally owned the key to. The locksmith arrived just before noon. He was polite, didn't ask questions when I said, all exterior locks. I signed the invoice and watched him drive off, the new keys resting cool and solid in my palm. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks without my phone face up on the nightstand. No late-night voicemails, no subtle threats hidden in family guilt. Just stillness. 2 days later, I moved into my new apartment small, clean, downtown. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, choosing where each item went as if I were stitching together a new version of myself. The kitchen window faced east. Every morning, light poured across the floor like a promise I hadn't dared believe in until now. At work, the buzz of deadlines returned quickly, but I was different. Mark from marketing leaned against my doorframe before lunch. Hey, Callista, he started. I'm in a tight spot with the print vendor. Would you mind fronting the deposit, just until reimbursements go through? Old Callista would have smiled, said yes, and rearranged her entire week to make sure someone else's comfort came first. This version of me just looked up and said, that's something accounting needs to approve. They can expedite if you explain the urgency. His face registered surprise, maybe even mild irritation, but he nodded and left. I turned back to my screen without skipping a beat. Later that afternoon, I opened the final box in my office, a small frame I'd picked up weeks ago but never used. I slid in a printed quote I'd saved to my phone long ago and hung it above my desk. Kindness without boundaries is self-erasure. I stepped back and read the words aloud, not as a mantra, but as a line drawn cleanly in the sand. My inbox pinged again this time from Aunt Rosamond. The subject line read, Update from Santa Fe. The envelope was pale blue, addressed in Arden's handwriting. My name centered and carefully underlined, no return address. But I knew it immediately. I waited until I was inside. The door locked behind me. Before I slid it open, inside was a folded sheet of thick stationery and a smaller envelope packed with crisp bills. $4,000. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Then I unfolded the note. Callista, this is the first payment. I'll send the same amount monthly until it's repaid. I know I won't fix anything this way. Not really. But you were right. Real respect is earned, and I had to lose everything to figure out what that means. Don't think this is forgiveness. I'm not asking for that. Just a clean slate eventually, if that's ever possible. Arden. No apology. No excuses. For once. Just the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't feel much of anything. Honestly, the money was clean, the bills uncreased. It smelled like a bank vault, like formality and distance and dignity. I walked it to my home office and placed it in a drawer labeled Future Home Fund. Not checking, not spending, just holding. I slipped the letter into a separate folder beneath it, alongside the deed and the notarized documents from the sale. Not as evidence, not anymore, but not discarded either. There was something in me quiet, not hopeful, but no longer bitter, like the first breath after staying underwater too long. Later that evening, I pulled up Aunt Rosamond's email and read her update again. Arden had taken the morning prep shift at the bistro. Mom was arranging fresh-cut flowers. Dad was learning to expedite. Rosamond said they were still resistant to rules, but not disrespectful. Not anymore. The letter sat on my desk all night. I didn't reread it, just saw the curve of my name in Arden's careful script and left the lamp on beside it. Morning light crept through the blinds before I finally turned it off. By then, I was already making a list: groceries, insurance renewals, paint samples for a future I could finally choose on my own. Rosamond met me at the back door of the bistro, wiping flour from her hands. She didn't say much, just nodded toward the small patio and set a teapot between us. I sat quietly, watching through the kitchen window. Mom was arranging flowers in small glass jars. Dad moved between stations with a clipboard, slower than I remembered, but purposeful. Arden passed by once with a tray in her hand. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to react. We didn't speak, but they nodded when they noticed. That was enough. They're working, Rosamond said. Pouring my cup, on more than just the menu. I smiled, not out of satisfaction, but relief. Not everything had to be reconciled to be righted. She looked at me for a long moment. You were never cruel, Callista. Just done. There's a difference. I stayed an hour longer than planned. We didn't talk about them much. We talked about business, about the apartment I was thinking of buying, about how good Santa Clara air felt when you stopped holding your breath in it. As I drove back up the coast, the sun dipped low and the sky turned amber. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A single text from my mother: happy birthday. No exclamation mark, no apology. Just that. I glanced at it once, then turned the screen face down. I didn't need anything from them anymore. Not acknowledgement, not regret, not even love. Some things, I finally understood, didn't have to be earned back. Some things didn't need to be answered. Some kids grow up in houses where the walls are blank or filled with family photos spread evenly among siblings. In our house, the walls were practically a shrine to my sister. Celeste, framed certificates, honor roll ribbons, art projects she'd brought home from elementary school. Every square foot seemed to celebrate something she'd done. There wasn't a single space that reflected me, unless you counted the occasional group picture where I stood off to the side. Celeste was older by 7 years, and in those years she'd claimed the role of family star. Mom and Dad called her our achiever, our bright one, or simply our pride and joy. I didn't even get a nickname. I was just Marissa. I wore her clothes after she outgrew them, whether they fit or not, every winter. A new coat would arrive for Celeste, and her old one buttons hanging by threads. Sleeves frayed would end up in my closet. Birthdays meant gifts that were practical, which usually translated to something Celeste had used before. A backpack with ink stains from her high school days. A bike with peeling paint and a seat worn thin from years of her rides. At school, I learned to keep quiet. Teachers who'd had Celeste before me would beam and say, "Oh, you're her sister. She was so talented." I'd smile, nod, and never mention that I didn't share her knack for science fairs or spelling bees. Even our dinner conversations revolved around her, if she had a soccer game. We all discussed her goals. if she'd aced a test. It became the centerpiece of the evening. If I'd had a good day. It might get a polite, "that's nice," before the conversation veered back to Celeste's plans for the weekend. I didn't realize how much I'd faded into the background until one afternoon in middle school. I brought home a drawing I'd worked on for weeks, my first attempt at charcoal shading. I left it on the kitchen counter, hoping Mom might frame it or at least hang it on the fridge. That night, when I came back for a glass of water, it was gone. I found it later in the recycling bin, folded in half, sitting under a stack of junk mail. I never said a word. By then, I'd already learned the truth in our house. My needs and achievements came second, always. And that truth only became sharper the day Celeste announced she was getting married. Celeste announced her engagement on a Sunday afternoon. Sweeping into the living room like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine, Jack proposed, she squealed, holding up her hand so the diamond could catch every bit of light. Mom gasped, tears already welling up, while Dad slapped Jack on the back like he'd just been inducted into some secret club. I sat on the edge of the couch, smiling faintly, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. Celeste eventually turned and said, "You'll be my bridesmaid." "Right," I nodded. "Of course. Congratulations." In the weeks that followed, the wedding became the family's entire universe. Fabric swatches, cake tastings, endless conversations about venues. Our dining table disappeared under glossy magazines and color charts. One night, coming home late from my part-time job at the coffee shop, I heard Mom and Dad in the kitchen, voices low. "We'll have to take out a loan." Dad said, "I know," Mom replied, her tone resigned but determined. "But it's Celeste's big day. We can't let her down." The words lodged in my chest. A loan for flowers and chair covers and a dress she'd wear once. I thought about my own savings account, barely enough for textbooks next semester, and bit my tongue. My opinions didn't carry much weight here. The wedding day arrived like a page ripped from a luxury bridal catalog. Celeste floated down the aisle in lace and satin, looking every bit the princess. Our parents beamed from the front row, their smiles wide enough to split their faces. I stood in the background, holding my bouquet, smiling when the photographer pointed the camera my way. No one saw the way my feet ached in the heels I'd bought secondhand, or how small I felt compared to the grandeur surrounding her. By the time the reception ended, the decision had already been made for me, whatever the cost. They would always find a way to give Celeste more. And that truth deepened a few months later, when she announced she was expecting twins. Celeste made her next announcement over Sunday dinner, placing her hands on her stomach with a dramatic pause. "We're having twins," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Mom nearly dropped the serving spoon, and Dad's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Two babies." Mom clapped her hands. "We'll have to start looking for a bigger house for you right away." I blinked. "A bigger house. They'll need the space," Dad explained, already launching into a list of neighborhoods. "We can help with the down payment. That colonial near the park just came on the market, perfect for kids." I stared at my plate, trying to process the fact that they were ready to shell out thousands of dollars for a second home when they were still paying off Celeste's wedding. The knot in my chest tightened, but I swallowed my frustration. A few weeks later, after the house purchase was finalized, I decided to bring up my own needs. "I've been looking at colleges," I said cautiously over breakfast. "I'd like to apply this fall. Could you help with tuition?" They exchanged a glance I'd seen 100 times before, the one that meant the answer would come with conditions. "Well," Dad said, "we can probably cover half. With the loan for the wedding and helping with the house. Money's tight." Half. The same parents who'd just written a check for Celeste's dream home could only spare half for my education. I managed a small "thanks" before retreating to my room, the walls closing in tighter than ever. That fall, I enrolled in the local community college, the only option I could afford. To cover the rest, I took a job waitressing at a diner on the edge of town. My days blurred into lectures, late-night shifts, and aching feet. And just when I thought I'd found a rhythm, Celeste started showing up on weekends with the twins in tow. The first time Celeste showed up unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd just finished a grueling week of midterms and double shifts at the diner. My plan was simple sleep, maybe catch up on laundry, and not speak to anyone unless I had to. Instead, the doorbell rang, and there she was, twins on each hip, diaper bag hanging off her shoulder. "You're a lifesaver." "Marissa," she said before I could even open my mouth. "Jack and I haven't had a date night in forever. We'll be back in a few hours." I started to protest, but she was already halfway down the front steps. That few hours turned into 6, and by the time they returned, my apartment looked like a tornado had passed through. Celeste scooped up the boys, kissed their cheeks, and breezed out the door without so much as a thank you. It didn't stop there. Soon, every weekend became a repeat performance. Sometimes she'd give me 10 minutes warning. Other times, I'd come home from work to find the twins already inside. My mom letting herself in with the spare key. "This is what family does," she'd say, handing me a sippy cup as if that settled it. "Besides, it's good practice for when you have your own kids." I wanted to scream. I was barely keeping my head above water lectures during the day, waitressing at night, and mountains of homework in between. My social life was non-existent. Friends eventually stopped inviting me out because my answer was always the same: "I can't. I'm babysitting." The resentment grew quietly at first, tucked between folding tiny clothes and reheating chicken nuggets. But by the 3rd month, it was a constant hum in the back of my mind. No one asked if I wanted to help. No one offered to swap weekends or give me a break. I was a built-in babysitter, nothing more. And no matter how exhausted I was, the expectation never changed. By the time I realized I couldn't keep living like this, I was already making plans for my first real break in years a short, cheap trip that I hoped would finally be mine alone. By the time spring rolled around, I was running on fumes. My days blurred into a relentless loop of classes, diner shifts, and weekend babysitting marathons. The thought of a break felt almost dangerous, like if I stopped moving, I might not be able to start again. One night, after my shift ended, I sat in the corner booth with my phone and a cup of stale coffee, scrolling through budget travel sites. I found a rundown but charming hotel in a nearby city, walking distance from a museum I'd always wanted to visit. 3 nights, ocean view if you leaned far enough over the balcony, and just barely within my price range. I booked it before I could talk myself out of it. When I told my parents, they actually seemed supportive. "Good for you, honey," Mom said, smiling like she'd just discovered I was capable of independent thought. "You deserve some time to yourself." I should have known better. The first day of my trip, I stepped off the bus with my overnight bag and a rare lightness in my chest. The hotel was exactly as described: faded carpet, squeaky doors, but clean. I dropped my bag on the bed and headed out for lunch at a little cafe, savoring every moment of silence. When I returned, voices echoed down the hall, familiar voices. My stomach sank. Surprise. Mom beamed as she stepped out of the room next to mine. Celeste was behind her, the twins squirming in her arms. "What are you doing here?" I managed. "Oh, we thought it would be fun to make it a family trip," Celeste said, already nudging the boys toward me. "They've been dying to see the city. Jack and I want to explore a bit, maybe grab dinner. You don't mind watching them, do you?" Before I could answer, Mom chimed in. "We'll be back soon," and they disappeared down the hallway. The next 48 hours were a nightmare. The twins tore through my small hotel room like they were competing for destruction points. They pulled the curtains down, shattered 2 glasses, and somehow managed to flush a plastic toy down the toilet, which resulted in a plumbing bill I had to cover before checking out. By the time they left, I was more exhausted than when I'd arrived. My so-called escape had turned into another weekend of unpaid childcare, only now it had cost me money I didn't have. On the bus ride home, one thought kept looping in my head: something had to change. The morning after my vacation, I woke up in my own bed feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My muscles ached from chasing the twins around, and my bank account balance sat in the double digits after paying for the hotel damages. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the weight of every unpaid hour, every hijacked weekend pressing down. By the time I walked into the kitchen, the decision had already settled in my chest. Mom was making coffee, Dad flipping through the paper. Celeste's latest text, another babysitting request, lit up my phone. I turned it face down. "I'm moving out," I said. Mom's head snapped up. "What? Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious. I've been looking for places. I found one I can afford with a roommate. You can't just leave," she said, her voice rising. "Who's going to help your sister with the twins?" "Her husband," I shot back. Dad set his paper down, his jaw tightening. "If you walk out, don't expect us to keep paying for school. You'll be on your own." I felt my pulse in my ears, but the fear that used to keep me in place wasn't there this time. "Then I'll be on my own." The conversation ended with slammed cabinet doors and the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. 2 weeks later, I was hauling my life into a second-floor walk-up across town. The place smelled faintly of old paint and dust, but it was mine or ours, technically, since my roommate, Tasha, was already stacking her moving boxes in the living room. I picked up extra shifts at the diner to cover rent, sacrificing what little free time I had. The exhaustion was bone deep. My meals were whatever I could heat in a microwave at midnight, and my bed was a mattress on the floor. But no one knocked on my door with 2 toddlers in tow. No one made me feel like my time belonged to them. Every morning, I woke up knowing I'd bought myself something that had never been handed to me choice. And, for the first time, I started to wonder what my life might look like if I built it entirely for me. 2 years after I'd left home, I crossed the stage at graduation to the sound of polite applause from strangers. I scanned the crowd instinctively. Even though I knew no one from my family was there, the seat I'd reserved stayed empty, my name echoing in the auditorium without a familiar voice to catch it. When the ceremony ended, I took photos with classmates, forcing a smile for the camera. The pride I felt was real, but it came with an ache one I knew would never fully go away. A week later, I accepted an entry-level position at a small marketing firm downtown. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to let me move out of the shared apartment and into a place that was completely mine. My new home was a studio with creaky floorboards, chipped cabinets, and a view of the alley behind a bakery. I loved it instantly. With weekends finally mine, I started exploring nearby towns, hopping on buses to places I'd only read about. I walked farmers' markets, hiked short trails, and lingered in used bookstores without worrying about when I had to be back. The absence of constant demands was almost startling. At first, I'd catch myself waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to ask me to drop everything and watch the twins. But as the months passed, the silence became something I treasured. Celeste still called occasionally, usually with a request disguised as a casual check-in. I kept the conversations short, always citing work or prior plans. My parents and I spoke even less. The distance between us wasn't just physical anymore, it was a kind of buffer I'd built to protect myself. For the first time, my days were mine to fill, and I didn't realize how fiercely I valued that until my 25th birthday, when they showed up with a gift that threatened to pull me right back in. My 25th birthday was low-key just dinner plans with a few friends at a neighborhood restaurant a week before. Mom called, her voice unusually bright. "We want you to come over on your birthday," she said. "The whole family will be here. We have something special for you." Against my better judgment, I went. When I walked into their living room, the twins were chasing each other around the coffee table, Celeste and Jack chatting with my parents like nothing had changed. After cake and small talk, Mom handed me a large envelope. "This," she said, smiling like she'd just handed me a winning lottery ticket, "is from all of us." Inside was a glossy packet for an all-expenses-paid trip to another city. The highlight 2 nights in a hotel and tickets to a massive outdoor concert. "We leave in 3 weeks," Dad announced. "It'll be so much fun, all of us together." Celeste leaned in, grinning. The boys are going to love it. It'll be great for them to have you there. Jack and I might sneak away to explore the city a bit. There it was. The real reason. I could already picture the weekend me stuck in a hotel room, trying to corral two sugar-charged 8-year-olds while everyone else enjoyed the show. I smiled just enough to pass for grateful. Wow, that's generous. What they didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd bought my own ticket to a completely different destination, a quiet coastal town a few states away, where the loudest thing I'd hear would be waves hitting the shore. My plan had been set long before this gift appeared. Now, it had just taken on an extra layer of satisfaction. I closed the envelope, thanked them all, and let them believe they'd just given me the best present of my life. In 3 weeks, we'd all go to the airport together, only I wouldn't be getting on their plane. The morning of the trip, I met them at the airport curbside. Mom was buzzing with energy, Dad juggling suitcases, Celeste and Jack already talking about all the sightseeing they'd do. The twins clung to their backpacks, and I could feel their expectant eyes on me. As we moved toward the check-in line, I put a hand to my stomach. "I'm just going to run to the restroom," I said casually. "You go ahead and get checked in. I'll meet you at the gate." They nodded, distracted by luggage tags and boarding passes. I turned down the concourse, my steps quickening until I reached another terminal. The sign for my gate coastal town. Boarding in 30 minutes was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in months. At the counter, I handed over my ID and my real ticket. No one called after me. No one stopped me. Within minutes, I was sliding into my seat by the window, the quiet hum of the plane a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind. Before switching off my phone, I typed a single message to Mom. "I'm not coming with you. Enjoy your trip." The response was immediate angry texts, voicemails, my name in all caps. I didn't read past the first few lines. The words selfish and ungrateful blurred together until they meant nothing. A flight attendant offered me champagne, and I accepted. As the plane taxied, I sipped slowly, watching the runway stretch ahead. The knot in my chest began to loosen. By the time we lifted into the air, the airport was a memory, and for the first time in years, so was the weight of their expectations. That week was everything I'd imagined: morning walks along the shore, afternoons exploring small shops, evenings lingering over dinners without watching the clock. I met people whose only expectations were to share a laugh or a conversation. No demands, no obligations. When I returned, the calm didn't last long. 2 days later, there was pounding at my door. Mom and Celeste stormed in, voices sharp, accusing me of ruining their trip and abandoning my responsibilities. I let them talk until the noise became one continuous blur. "I don't owe you anything," I said finally, my voice even. "Not my time, not my money, and definitely not my weekends. If you want childcare, hire someone. I'm not it." They stared at me, stunned. As I walked to the door and opened it, "You can leave now, within a month." I'd signed a lease on a new apartment in a different part of town. I didn't give them my address. My time filled with work, painting classes, and planning my next trip this time without a secret exit strategy. The door between us had finally closed. Whether it stayed locked or not was no longer up to them.